Hello, good evening, good evening, good evening. WeatherBrains episode number 616 for November 6th, 2017. It's the pre-show. Marvelous, marvelous part of the program. In fact, for some people, they say they watch this and they turn it off the minute the show begins, which is not exactly the point, but that's okay. We do three things here. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and say outrageous things. And the two fellows with me, I know, have something on their mind. So go.
Just remember, when you email at weatherbrains.com, it goes to all the panelists.
Yeah, that's good. I want to know if the hosts can turn it off after the pre-show as well. Do we get that option?
Yeah, yeah, boy, I wish we did sometimes. No, that's an idea. We just come on here at 15 after the hour and talk for 15 minutes, and then we're done. We just go. We do this, so that saves a lot of work, and that way nobody has to worry about newscasts and issues. So
blasphemous.
So I had this weird deal this last week. You guys have ever heard something called Vice News on HBO?
No,
I don't watch television.
I know you said you were going to be on it, but I don't know anything about it. How did it go?
Well, they followed me around all day. And they had it was a 2-camera shoot. So there were 2 camera guys. In fact, one guy was literally right here behind me in the closet while I was doing some of these videos. And,
creepy.
Very creepy, but they're very nice people. And, I thought it went okay.
Why are they so interested in you?
I to this day, I don't know.
What is it called again?
Vice News on HBO. And
it's going to be on the real TV or just on
it's a hipster thing. I'm not a hipster. I don't watch I've not watched HBO in probably 25 years. So
these hipsters go out and stand in the closet of non-hipsters and make a TV show out of it?
Yes, they put a camera right behind you. And we started talking, and they talked with me while I was driving and in the schools, and they wanted me to go walk the streets of downtown Birmingham and talk, and we did all that. It's fine. But right at the end, before they left at the station here, they started getting into the climate.
There we go.
It was a setup.
Yep.
So maybe that was it.
They wanted to lull you into a false sense of security that they were actually interested in your school visits. And
they wanted to come in. But I don't know. Who knows? It might be a hatchet job. But
I
think I was under control. In fact, I had one of our guys stay in the room just to kind of tell me if I got out of hand. And I think I got my finger going one time. It wasn't a fish shake. It was a finger wag, which is a big difference.
That's one level below.
Right. And I think I only said, "What's the matter with you?" one time.
What's the matter you?
Yeah. What's the matter with you? No, but I enjoyed I told the lady I really enjoyed this conversation. It was marvelous. And, I think you and I should realize the things that bring us together in this. And there's a lot. And
she was opposed to your point of view. Is that it?
Well, no, her point was that I should be on television talking about climate change on a very regular basis. And and I said, well, ma'am, number one, I'm not a climatologist. And I was told years ago, tell them what you know and don't tell them what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And I refer them to Marshall Shepard, our friend, John Christie, Stu Ostro. There's some brilliant people that love to talk about this, and they're qualified to talk about it. And I just don't have time. Number one, I don't have time. And I said, what do you want me to do in the middle of a tornado outbreak? Say, stop. This is a global climate emergency. No, this is weather. This is weather.
Yes.
And, anyway, I shouldn't. But listen, it was a very healthy conversation.
You have to have HBO to be able to see this when it comes out?
I don't know. I need to find out more. But they were very nice. They were to follow me around. They've got to be okay.
More importantly,
me all day.
Where can we watch the pre-show of this show? That's the real.
Yeah, that is the best part of any show. It's the pre-show. Right. And is Matt Lanza going to join us tonight?
He is.
Ooh, this is going to be a good show. I should read our calendar notes. I've been a bad boy.
They change about every 5 minutes. So
Well, that's okay. That's
it's
one
like
good
the
reason.
run pass option in football. You never know where the ball's going to go.
Hey, look who's back from his Wi-Fi stealing trip to Saudi Arabia, wherever. Brian Peters.
Let's see your tan, Brian.
Brian, did you start that civil war in Saudi Arabia when you were over there?
Oh man,
No, I didn't steal any Wi-Fi. I didn't have any instruments of Wi-Fi. Yeah, I was off the grid.
good
I
for
thought you were in like the Gulf of Mexico.
I was.
Oh, okay. Well, that's nowhere near Yemen, then. How'd you come up with that, James?
What's going on in Yemen?
Never let facts get in the way of a good story. That's what
Trade
they
some missiles over there.
Absolutely.
Just another day at the office.
No, I don't like this Saudi Arabia story. This doesn't look good. We're teeter-tottering on all kind of bad stuff here. You know, you got Trump over there in South Korea, and this guy with the bad hair, he might launch a nuke tonight. You got the Saudi Arabia mess going on here. Stock market's overvalued.
I didn't think I could talk about politics and stuff like that on here.
Yeah, don't do that.
Politics brains.
I always get buzzed.
You picked on his hair, and now you're going to subject us all to hacking to Sony, and we're all going to get hacked.
Well, he was talking about our president's hair.
No, he was
they-
the other guy with the bad hair.
They both could. They both could use a makeover. I'll put it that way. So
I'm going to
They
get
both
off.
have good-looking
I
wives.
got a bad feeling about this show. It's going down real fast. It's going to get dangerous.
Well, James recognized
No,
the
this
quality
is
of our
right.
guest right off the bat. That was a good sign.
Hey, Matt, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, our advice is to run
Yeah, this
before
is
it's too late.
He can hear us, and he's still here.
Yeah, that's. No, we tend to. What happens, Matt, at the bottom of the hour here in like 5 minutes? I've got a monitor up here so I can see when it goes on television. This is aired locally on television, so the minute that happens, we just immediately clean up and good evening. How are you? We go NPR, where this is more like the.
Are they monetizing
I
this
don't know
in some
about
way?
No,
There's no.
I watch and I see no insertion of any ad. Now they do have ad messages on the channel at the top and the bottom of the hour, but they don't even interrupt the show. It just runs clean. But if they do, I think we ought to get a big cut, like 127%.
Which gives us all $1.
holding my breath.
No, I would love to know how much that channel generates. Most local stations have a digital weather channel that is a .2 or a .3, and in our case, we had one that was running all these maps and videos, and we just scaled back, and now it's just radar, which I think that's what people want. Older people that maybe don't have, a good radar app on their phone, but they can watch it on television. So
Yeah.
But every break there's ad messages in there, so I'd love to know how they sell that, if they sell that separately, if that's an add-on to something else. I don't know. We have so many channels here and so many opportunities, but there are ad messages, but they don't even interrupt the show for the top of the hour ID, which is probably illegal.
They do a lot of tack-ons here, which I think was a mistake. But a regular deal has got some tack on it. It's you get your logo on the 7-day for a day or whatever it is, and I think what they've done is back themselves into a corner where they've devalued the main product. And it's a small town. There's only so many advertisers here, and I think that they've all grown to they come in and say, okay, well here's buy this, this, and this, and then they all expect some little tack on, which again is devaluing the main product in my humble opinion, and forces them to come up with more caca to tack stuff onto, or to tack on, which just becomes noise. But
yeah, they when Sinclair came in here, they blew up a lot of stuff, which is certainly they can do whatever they want to, but they blew up the James Spann app, and they blew up that channel. At the time, the channel was branded James Spann 24/7, and the app was branded James Spann 24/7. And I do know at that point the Albritons sold that channel separately. That was not some kind of value-added thing where we throw in some free spots. And I want to say it was making about $500,000 in sales per year, which, hey, that's just gravy. So, but now with this, I don't know.
We have, I got a note from Irene Sands in Florida, and she said you should get a digital salesperson on from a television station. And so it's not till January, but I've got Andrew Yeager, who's the digital sales manager for Channel 5 in Dallas, is going to join us. So I'm very excited about that.
I cannot wait to ask questions because the question is, so now we are delivering all of our stuff on Facebook. What? Hello?
No, I'm sorry. I just realized we scheduled him for January, but because Bill gave me a couple of days in December, but I was unsure of my December schedule. But as of earlier today, I am now sure of my December schedule. So maybe we can bump him up even a little further.
Yeah, everything is now jam-packed till February, the third week.
Oh, you filled all those December
Yeah,
days?
you can maybe move something around, Kevin.
No, that's fine.
But no, I would love to know how this stuff is monetized and how the fact that we put so much on Facebook hurts the digital effort. So people, instead of going to our apps or websites or digital properties, they just get it on Facebook. And I don't even know this. Can you sell ad messages in Facebook videos and put it in content? I don't know. We'll find out.
You couldn't for a long time. I stopped. I think there were some inroads there, but then I stopped paying attention.
Yeah. In Sinclair's working with them. There's all kind of shenanigans going on here. I don't know.
Nothing but shenanigans.
Yeah, it's shenanigans is the right way of doing it.
That would be the show title, but we're not there yet.
No. So we got Kim getting married. I knew she was getting married, but I didn't know it was this weekend. Wow.
Where are they doing?
I
in Norman or in Oak City?
Don't know, but I did. My invitation must be lost in the mail. I know you guys got yours.
Yeah, right.
She would not want some old creeper hanging out in her wedding here. And speaking of old creepers,
don't talk about Brian that way.
Another show.
Welcome to the television audience here. It's 30 minutes after the hour. This is WeatherBrains. And if you're on the TV side, you know the way this works. You typically kind of join our pre-show in progress. And the minute you join us, we can start the actual show. And for those that might be new, this is a core podcast. We've been doing this for umpteen years, I think, 12? And I know this is episode number 616, and we do it once a week, so you can do the math. But if you want to listen to the produced podcast version, that is typically posted around 2-3 a.m. Following Tuesday each week. But many of you just watch. And if you are, thanks. Sit back, relax. There's going to be some wholesome entertainment. We know you're not watching Dancing with the Stars. You're watching us on the dot twos here. So let's get this sucker started here. And this is when I magically turn
There's a kid from Birmingham on Dancing with the Stars.
Oh, really? See, I have two monitors in my office on the wall. One is the main channel, and we're an ABC affiliate, so I've got Dancing with the Stars on one, and we are on the other, which is the Weather Channel. So
I think the costumes that Brian wears are much better than the Dancing with the Stars.
No doubt. All right, here we go.
Should be on there.
Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, this is WeatherBrains, episode number 616. This is the weekly show that's all about weather. Let's see, November 6th, 2017. Goodness, I watched a little bit of television this evening during our newscast, and the Christmas commercials are running wild. 'Tis the season. I mean, the minute Halloween is over, it's all Christmas now. So, Brian Peters, have you finished your Christmas shopping list?
All done.
So, wow. Great. I was hoping you'd buy me one of those new iPhone 10s. Is that you got that ready to go, Brian, as a gift?
Yes, I'm giving one to myself.
Oh, you're going to buy one?
I'm contemplating.
Brian, the thing, it's $1,000 for a phone. I mean, you're going to spend $1,000 on a phone.
What's the difference in spending $1,000 and spending $850? I mean, what's $150 when you're that high anyway?
Apple cares like $250 on that thing, right?
Oh, I'm going to be careful with it. I haven't broken one yet.
There's your show title right there.
I'm going to be careful with it.
I'm going to be careful with it. The show title
right out of the gate there.
So right. somebody had one yesterday, and I fiddled around with it, and the screen is beautiful. I'll give you that. In the face unlock is cool, but just boiling down to it, I looked at that, and the one I've got the 7, and it's just screaming fast, and it works great, and I'm just not ready to drop $1,000 on a phone. Maybe I'm just an old fuddy-duddy here, but Brian is a hipster that's going to get $1,000 phone. So Brian, tell us.
You don't ever use Brian and hipster in the same sentence. That's totally
And
impossible.
I will say, I'm a little worried about that OLED stuff, because the Google
Yep.
Pixel 2 XL has got a problem with burn-in, and this funny tints of color when you look at it kind of sideways, and it's a little different from these LCD displays, which is what I've got here. So I'm just saying, but
Well, I have a problem that my current iPhone is doing some strange things. And the battery life has gone down to like 4 hours.
Yeah,
Which one do you have,
that's
Brian?
What's that?
Which one do you have?
It's either a 6 or 7. I'm not sure. I think it's 6.
I think the new operating system slowed mine down tremendously.
Yeah, me too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well,
that
it did.
I was going to say that's what happened to me. I had a 6, the big 6, and it was just struggling. And I wear these things out, and mine was slow, and the battery life was poor. So it's probably time. But I've got the 7 Plus. I got it last year. It's still screaming fast. Works great, so I have no issues. So I'm happy. Welcome to Cell Phone Brains, by the way.
You've always been a little partial to our technology on here.
No. So anyway, we've got the lovely Aubrey. So Aubrey, what kind of fancy phone do you have?
I have the Google Pixel.
Oh,
Which was and of course my bear right here showing off the Google Pixel, the #1 rated camera phone before I think Apple came out with its new fancy attempt to beat Google Pixel at the camera phone thing. And then
this is a Pixel or a Pixel 2?
This is a Pixel. And then Google said, aha, we got you, and came out with the Pixel 2. But this is the original Pixel, which is still pretty fantastic.
Mm-hmm. I laid hands on the Pixel 2 this weekend, and it's nice.
Yeah.
No, I think the Pixel 2 looks great. Again, the nice thing about the problem with these Samsung phones, it's got all this junk, all this bloatware, and
that's the carrier.
One of these Windows boxes with all this junk.
Yeah, you're right.
So anyway, if I were to go that way, I would go the Pixel all day because it's pure Android with no bloatware.
Yep.
And here, yes, that brings up a really good point. Here's a public service announcement too, because that happened to my dad. He got his first smartphone just, I don't know, in the last sometime this year. And he got it because he started to look around, and Verizon came and said, oh, well, we're going to give you this free Galaxy S8 or 7 or whatever it was. I wanted him to get an iPhone because that's what we have, and I could coach him through it, and we could do FaceTime and all that kind of stuff. But they gave it to him for free, and the nonsense, the stuff on that phone was staggering. I couldn't even, with the thing in my hands, figure out some of the stuff so that he could send messages or whatever we were trying to do because of all the caca-poo-poo that was on there.
We interrupt this program for a CBS Radio Net Alert Bulletin.
Tropical Depression 19 is now Tropical Storm Rena.
Oh,
hallelujah!
I love it when breaking news breaks out on this show. But we'll pick up this cell phone discussion later. Let's see, Brian Peters, you were out last week. You were in some cruise ship to Acapulco or Walla Walla or where?
Costa Maya and Cozumel. Very nice locations.
So how were the accommodations?
They were great. We had a grand suite. It was wonderful. Balcony. Enjoyed. It was 84 degrees when we went to the Mayan ruins at Costa Maya. It was wonderful.
he just looks depressed to be here now, doesn't he?
Yeah, you went from that to
relaxed.
I've been reeling over the last couple of days, getting back into the swing of things.
He's back on WeatherBrains, and the entire vacation is erased in 5 minutes.
Not quite, but almost.
By the way, for the young aspiring meteorologist who might be in high school or college looking for a career, you might want to consider NOAA, because this is what that big federal retirement paycheck will do for you. Take these wonderful vacation packages.
You better be careful. I'm in discussion with Carnival to become their official meteorologist.
Ooh.
Wow.
So Brian, were you in the part where they had the travel ban?
No,
Oh, okay.
I don't think so.
Well, because of the drug wars and things?
Yeah, they have a huge travel ban in Mexico, and I'm still debating on whether I want to go to Cancun in January or not because of the travel ban.
Wow.
Yeah, Brian just packed some heat. He doesn't care.
So you're saying it was fine, basically.
It was great where we were. I mean,
open carry cruise.
We didn't even get off the ship at Cozumel because we've been there 2 times before. So there was no, we just didn't have anything we really wanted to do. But Costa Maya was very nice. They drove us to the Mayan ruins, and we got to. Part of it is preserved, and part of it is still available for you to kind of walk on. So it was very interesting. We had a very good guide who gave us lots of good information. And for the first time in my life, I saw a pineapple field.
Ooh.
I've never seen a pineapple field before.
Oh, yeah.
That's cool.
All right.
It is cool.
You didn't drop your pants on the poop deck, did you?
Wow. There's your show title.
I did go naked on the balcony. Does that count?
Oh my God.
Mm.
All right. So Bill Murray bringing our guest before he runs.
I can hear the sound of feet as he heads into the distant sunset.
Some advice: no, don't go on the clothing optional cruise with Brian Peters. Not a good idea. Brad Panovich just sent us our official Animoji.
Oh, he's got one of those fancy phones.
There you go. Yeah. So we now have a WeatherBrains Animoji. He says. So
That's kind of cool.
So
all right, Brian, you can make one when you get your fancy phone.
All right.
So for after sitting on the sidelines for all this time, our guest WeatherBrain is a senior meteorologist at Cheniere Energy in Houston. Matt Lanza, welcome to the show. I don't think you've ever been on the show, have you?
I have not. This is
how did I let that happen? You must have been scheduled and canceled or something.
I just haven't had much of anything interesting to say yet.
Well, I don't know.
What do you mean? You're like a big deal.
Thought he was going to say he's not interested in the show.
No, that would have been a good answer. We had to do an immediate reschedule, which has been a frequent problem lately because one of our guests couldn't be on this week, and I tweeted Matt about 4:30 and said, "Hey, can you do the show tonight?" And so,
I can't say no to that.
So nice to do that. We appreciate it. So thanks for joining us. But you had a great presentation at NWA in California, man. It kind of brought the house down. I think a lot of people would have voted it one of the best presentations there, and it was a weather history thing, which always gets my attention. It was about because James Spann, what do you think the state snowfall record, single storm snowfall record, is for Louisiana? You may already know.
In terms of snow amounts, like an amount for one storm.
What would you put that at?
23.
27 inches in Shreveport.
Okay, how close is he there, Matt Lanza?
He is about 3 inches too high.
I said 23. Thank you very much.
Kevin was just an inch off.
Kevin's the winner.
24
Was this Shreveport?
No, it actually
was Rain, Louisiana.
It was Galveston.
Galveston's not in Louisiana, Kevin.
That's close enough.
Well, we'll hang on with everything on this one.
While I watch the cannons flashing,
Hang on here. We got to let it play for a minute.
I clean my gun and dream of Galveston.
Yay, Glenn!
A little fair use there, no problem. Yeah, the golden voice of Glenn Campbell. Song from my childhood. So how much did it snow in Galveston in that storm?
So Galveston got, I think, 14 inches of snow. Let me confirm.
And
that,
who measured
it?
I took good notes during your talk, Matt Lanza.
Yeah, you did. You did. None other than Isaac Klein of Isaac Storm fame.
And this was before the hurricane of 1900. Because
5 years.
That's cool.
Can you imagine having been at Galveston for a 15-inch snowfall and a hurricane that killed 6,000 people? That's just incredible.
That's crazy.
So tell us a little bit more about this thing. Or Kevin, go ahead. Ask away. Why we
that? I think for those who didn't get to see it, give us the condensed version of the presentation.
Yeah. So February 1895. It pretty much. I mean, from my own personal point of view, it has to be the most anomalous and crazy weather event in U.S. history. You're talking a widespread snow across the Gulf Coast that accumulated to approximately 20 inches in Houston. Like we just said, about 14, 15 inches in Galveston. There were pockets near Beaumont, Port Arthur, Lake Charles that got 25 to 30 inches of snow, apparently. And you even got snow as far east as New Orleans, southern Mississippi, and probably southern Alabama. I don't think I had any snow totals from there, but this definitely went all the way to Florida. There was reports of up to 1 inch of snow, I believe, in Lake City, Florida. Just in between pretty much where the peninsula meets the Panhandle, west of Jacksonville.
Kind of halfway between Tallahassee and Jacksonville.
Yeah, it's a wonderful drive between Tallahassee and Jacksonville. So just an incredible widespread storm. And like going south, you had snow 5 inches down to Corpus Christi, Brownsville. So the entire Gulf Coast, essentially, other than the Florida Peninsula, ended up with measurable snow, and in some cases, a foot or more of it. So just kind of looking at it and trying to see, is there any sort of analog that we've had to that storm? I don't really think there is. The closest is probably Christmas Eve of 2004, when we had about 12 inches, I think as much as 15 inches of snow in parts of Texas, south of Houston. It was a white Christmas for places south of Houston, so it was pretty remarkable, that storm as well. But there were some similarities between the Christmas Eve 2004 storm and the 1895 storm when you're looking at the reanalysis data. But obviously, there's not a lot of good, hard observations that you can really look at meteorologically, so you're making a lot of assumptions, kind of taking the 04 storm and putting it in the context of the 1895 one.
Yeah, it also was Mobile's all-time record was 6 inches, I think, Matt.
Yeah, that probably was it. It was probably in that storm. I think I saw Hattiesburg had 8 inches of snow, and New Orleans had, I think, about 8 inches as well.
So can you make up some sort of rudimentary surface analysis based upon reports and come up with a track and stuff like that?
A couple things that I was able to kind of put together. Number one, you have the daily weather maps that were put out by the Weather Bureau at the time. And they're so-so. They're only doing so much. Obviously, you can't sample the Gulf and what was going on out there. But looking at it, looking at that and looking at the reanalysis. So NOAA puts a reanalysis data. So you've got historical weather maps that go back every 6 hours. I don't know what it is, but all the way back into the 1800s. They basically tried to model past weather. So it's not going to be perfect, but it's probably going to be pretty close to what you would expect. So kind of looking at it, what I thought initially was that it was a low pressure system that formed on the tail end of a cold front, went across the Gulf, off Florida, and then up the East Coast, because there was also a second batch of snow totals that were over 6 inches from like Charlotte, north of Atlanta, all the way up through Virginia into Delmarva. So my thinking was, okay, this is probably a coastal low. But when I looked at it some more, it looked more like it was an overrunning event. And then you had a separate East Coast storm that formed off Florida and took care of the Carolinas up to Virginia with their snowfall. So basically what happened was this. You had a cold front come through the Gulf Coast on the night before Valentine's Day, 1895. When I was going back and researching the storm, I read newspaper accounts from the time, and they all described essentially the same thing, that it was a chilly day on the 13th, but front came through, wind shifted from the north, basically had a gusty north wind. It was raining, and then it gradually started to mix with and change over to sleet and snow. In Houston, they reported, I think, about 1 inch of snow through about midnight or 1 a.m. on the night of the 13th going into Valentine's Day. And then it just blew up the next day, and it snowed like crazy across the Gulf Coast on Valentine's Day. It sounded like it kind of came in waves, so there were probably batches of snow that kind of came through. So, you had this front, so you've got the cold air that's just pouring in and getting locked in at the surface. And then a few thousand feet up, you've got warm air taking Gulf moisture over top of that. And you're just dumping snowfall basically on the Gulf Coast because the air was so cold. One of the other things, and I think this is one of the precursors that you need to have for a Gulf Coast or a deep South Texas snowstorm, is you need to have a lot of cold air in the plains. Because when you get these fronts that come through and you get the north winds that come down the plains, moderate too much. So you need to have really cold air. And when I was researching the storm, even a couple days before the storm, there were actually articles published in Galveston's newspaper that were letters from mayors or town officials in Oklahoma and I think Kansas as well, that were essentially pleading for help because it was such a cold, miserable winter up there that they were running short on food. And basically the gist of their message was people are starving to death up here. So I don't know exactly the specifics in like Oklahoma City and parts of Kansas, but I do know it was one of their colder winters on record, the winter of 1894-95. So you had a lot of cold air that was able to kind of dump into Texas and Louisiana and the Gulf Coast behind that front that pretty much assured that it would be snow and not, rain or a mix or whatever. So it was just fascinating, and just kind of thinking about, could we do that again today? And you probably could, if you have the right setup. So
talk about that Christmas 2004 event. Remind us about it, Matt, because it was pretty interesting, not on that scale, but it was a pretty phenomenal event by itself, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. That event, I think, sort of developed similarly, where you had a front that kind of dumped through, and you had overrunning moisture that came up over the Gulf. I think it was a little bit further south when things came up, and just kind of looking at the maps and kind of comparing the two storms, there were a couple of differences. When you look up about 20,000 feet, 500 millibar level, you had in 2004 less of a cutoff low over the southern plains. So basically you had low pressure in the jet stream that cut itself off over Texas and the plains and just sat there in 1895, whereas in 2004 you didn't really have that. So I think in the 1895 event, that was one of the things that kind of kick-started the moisture, whereas in the 2004 event, it was the same kind of setup, but you just had a little bit less oomph behind it to really get heavy snow over a large area, whereas it was more over an isolated area south of Houston, north of Corpus Christi, and even grazed parts of Louisiana and places to the east. So I think if you had maybe a slightly stronger upper level disturbance behind the 04 storm, you could have had something similar. But snow totals in the 2004 storm were still impressive. I mean, you had isolated pockets of, I think, 12 to 16 inches near Victoria, Texas, in between Houston and Corpus Christi. So it was definitely not a weak storm by any means. It was pretty impressive, and especially if you consider the timing being right on Christmas. For Texas, it's just kind of like a whoa moment for, I think, a lot of Texans. And I think the thing that's interesting is a lot of people don't remember that storm necessarily. I think that would have been kind of top of the news, but 2004 Christmas was when the Sumatra earthquake happened in Indonesia with the tsunami. So that kind of gets the 04 Christmas storm gets kind of lost in the shuffle because of that.
You shared a slide at NWA with some old newspaper accounts, and some of that writing is just lost today. Can you share any of those? I've got one pulled up. Can you read maybe an opening paragraph or something? Because it's just amazing what the writing was like on those old stories.
Yeah, so let me do that. So because I kind of geeked out over this. So I watching this, interesting to everything, but just the way they wrote. So this, I'm going to read an excerpt from the Brenham Daily Banner. Brenham is a town in Texas, west of Houston, basically in between Houston and College Station. And the newspaper on February 15th described the event in Brenham. So the headline was, "The snow and beautiful snow, whiter than the mountain sleet it fell." So the article opens with, "All of Wednesday night, polar spirits swept the earth until boundless snow had deformed the withered heath, and the people of this section, for the first time within the memory of the oldest inhabitant, looked out upon nature fringed with a beard made white with other snows than those of age. Measuring rods were tested in hundreds of places, many contending that the snow was 4, 5, and 6 inches deep, but strange as it seemed, it did not stop, and by noon, nobody dared deny that 7 inches of snow covered the ground." So they even argued about snow totals back then too. There was another really good section in this. Quite a number of young ladies were out and entered with zest into the sport of snowballing. They visited the courthouse and went up in the cupola to get a good view of the snow-covered city and pronounced it a scene unsurpassed in sublime grandeur. The sable pall of sky, the billowy hills swathed in the snow robes that had so kindly been thrown over nature, the skeleton trees fringed with rich silver drapery, and distant streams dumb in frost chains made a picture never witnessed before from the Brenham Courthouse. So, I mean, like, when have you seen that written anytime, recently to describe just a snowstorm?
That's the way Span writes on every blog post he does.
Yes, exactly.
So, yeah, it was quite the storm. And I think so. One of the cool stories that I think to tell, well, there were a couple of cool stories, but the snowballing. So, I mean, we know how people in the South react today when it snows. We all kind of collectively, I don't want to say lose our minds, but we do, whenever there's snow in the forecast. When you're getting 15, 20 inches of snow in a place where it never snows, it gets crazy and people just go bonkers. So in the 1895 storm, there were a lot of instances where people just kind of went out onto the streets. They didn't know what to do with themselves. So they just started making snowballs and throwing them at each other and just kind of having fun. But there were a couple of stories where in one case in Houston, they were taking like little rocks or pebbles that were in the dirt. The streets were dirt at that time. So you were taking rocks and pebbles and kind of putting it in the snowball. So when you were throwing it at somebody, you would actually hurt them a little more. Interesting. And in fact, the newspaper in Houston really gave an admonishment to the Houston Police Department for not doing enough to keep people under control during the storm. They were pretty upset about that. And then one of the other fascinating stories was in Galveston. There was a snowball fight that happened, and you have to keep in mind that people were just throwing snowballs at anybody. It didn't matter who it was. There were people walking by the street. They didn't even know them. They were throwing snowballs at them. Well, one guy got hit with a snowball in Galveston. He was not pleased about that. And 1800s Texas, he pulled out a gun and shot the guy that threw the snowball at him. So
that's a Texas snowball fight.
Never caught the guy. So I don't know what happened there. But
done that to people.
I mean, it makes you wonder what would happen today. Hopefully
Oh,
not
Lord.
like that. But it's just it's just a crazy stories from back then. Well, another one was the governor of Texas, or the outgoing governor of Texas in Austin. They got about 5-6 inches of snow in Austin, and he was walking out of the Capitol, and a whole bunch of young boys were there waiting with snowballs and just hurled them at the guy, and he fell down in the snow and was rolling around and loved it. He had so much fun with it. And it was just all these stories about kind of mostly having fun in the snow.
So Matt, any other forays into weather history, or has this been your main thrust into the subject?
This was kind of, so I had done, one of the other things, by day, I'm a meteorologist at an energy company, and sort of as a side project, I work with Eric Berger here in Houston on Space City Weather, weather blog that covers Houston weather. And so one of the things that we came up with last year was, let's start writing some like past Houston weather history. We have a lot of new people in Houston that don't necessarily know the weather history here. So we can kind of, talk about some past events. I think I did one on a 1992 tornado outbreak here in Houston, Channelview, the only F4 tornado in Houston area on record. Miraculously killed nobody. We had a whole bunch of tornadoes that day and nobody died. So that was a fascinating article to write, especially kind of seeing how that developed. And then we did the 1895 storm. And then I was actually in the middle of doing a piece on the Galveston hurricane of 1900, doing some research into that. I really wanted to talk about areas not necessarily heavily covered. I mean, everybody knows about Galveston, and we talk a lot about Galveston, but there were mainland areas southeast of Houston that were devastated as well during the hurricane. So I wanted to do that. And then Harvey came along and kind of interrupted all that. So that's kind of on the back burner now while we sort of focus on flooding. And I think one of the things going forward is I want to talk about some flood events in the past in Houston to just kind of hammer home the idea to people that, flooding here in Houston is actually something that happens more frequently than we realize. And that, while the last 3 years have been ridiculous here, it may not be as anomalous as maybe we think. For the Houston area, it's just that we've had so much population growth in the last 20 years that it's all magnified now. So just raising awareness on things, which I think is good for people in this area.
So Matt, give us your personal account of Hurricane Harvey since you're there, and did your home make it through the storm okay? And kind of how are things today? We've talked about it a lot over the last few weeks, but it's always good to keep it top of mind.
Yeah. We were fortunately very lucky and fine. Our home didn't have any damage, so we were blessed in that regard. So yeah, it's a surreal experience, and one that I'm still kind of processing, even a couple of months later. Just kind of going through it, and with my day job at work for an energy company, it kind of turned into like, okay, well, we have to keep the business operating to, whoa, people have houses, on the Texas coast that they're going to lose down near Corpus Christi. Our company has sites in Corpus Christi. Our headquarters is in Houston, and we also have a site in Sabine Pass near Beaumont, Port Arthur. All three of those areas had, absolutely devastating events. So, it really turned from being this is how the business is going to run to people really wanted information about their property and what they need to do for safety. So it was just kind of, going from taking off the forecasting hat to putting on the forecasting and, to some extent, giving people information that they needed when they needed it. In addition to all this with the weather blog that we're running. So it was kind of like doing two full-time, things at once. Eric Berger did just magnificent work with the blog leading up to the storm, because I was, on 8 conference calls a day at work. So I hardly had any time to breathe leading up to the storm, but he did a great job, leading into the forecast and talking about it. And I kind of helped him out once things, calmed down from a forecast perspective a little bit as we got into the weekend and it became a nowcasting situation. But it was just, it was incredible. There were two moments that really stuck with me was, waking up on the Friday before the storm and just kind of being sick and stressed and kind of exhausted. Kind of had to get myself back together. And then the other one was after the tremendous rains that we had the Saturday night of Harvey in the Houston area. Found out that my brother-in-law's house took on 2 feet of water southeast of Houston, and that just kind of crushed me. And when that Saturday afternoon before the heavy rains really moved back in, you're just looking at Weather Mama data, and I've never felt sick physically sick looking at Weather Mama data, and just kind of seeing that there was definitely a legitimate potential that you were going to see 15, 20 inches of rain over 12 to 14 hours in parts of the area. It was just numbing. So it was definitely disturbing, but the Houston area is resilient. I have to give people here a lot of credit. I mean, things are not good in a lot of parts of the city still. But if you're downtown, you're going about your business, it's almost business as usual for a lot of people. But there's still a lot of people that are struggling. One of the things I told friends and family that wanted to come down here or offer up volunteering and whatnot is I'm like, just wait. Everybody's going to be helping out Houston over the next couple of weeks after the storm, but 2 or 3 months from now, there's going to be people that are going to be needing help. And that's definitely the case right now, that there's still a lot of people. It's like everybody's moved on. Obviously, we've had devastation in Puerto Rico. We've had devastation in Florida. It's just, there's so many, everybody's spread thin, that Houston, we're pretty well off, all things considered, but there's folks in the city that still need help and still need resources to get back on their feet. We went to the Houston Food Bank. I'm a Rutgers alumni. A group of us from Rutgers got together that are in Houston. We went to the food bank this past weekend and volunteered for a few hours. And they said they're still in disaster mode. They plan to be in disaster mode through early next year. It's a slow recovery. There's a lot of parts of the city that are fine, but people still need help.
So the first ideas of rebuilding plans and things like that, I've seen things in Twitter about that. What's the talk right now, Matt, in terms of how that aid will be tied to mitigation or new rules and regulations or anything like that?
There's a big wish list for the Houston area because we have big issues that we need to tend to. As crazy as it is to even think about, Harvey was horrible. It could be worse. If you had a Category 4, Category 5 type storm with a storm surge of that magnitude, at least, that comes in south of Houston, south of where Hurricane Ike tracked in 2008, the storm surge that would come into Galveston and up the Houston ship channel would just be unfathomable. And the Houston ship channel, for those of you that don't know, is essentially the largest, congregation of petrochemical and industrial facilities in the United States. And it's on this waterway that as of right now isn't technically protected from storm surge other than some levees here and there in parts of it. So, you're talking about a catastrophe for area and an environmental catastrophe that would just be completely unfathomable. So there's been this plan on the table since Hurricane Ike to get what they call the Ike Dike, which is building essentially a floodgate off of Galveston that would be akin to something that you see in the Netherlands. There's also a proposal for another gate in the middle of Galveston Bay. And both of those would essentially protect both the Houston Ship Channel and Galveston from 25, 30-foot storm surge in the worst case scenario. So, those plans are on the table, but that's obviously a $10 billion project, if not more. So, trying to get money for that, and then trying to figure out what to do in Houston, because we've had properties that have flooded 3-4 times in the last 5 years. Need to be bought out. We need to start thinking about how we're developing the city. Everybody talks about Houston being no zoning. We're the largest city in the country without zoning regulations. And while that's an issue to some extent, it's not really what caused the problem. What caused the problem is just people building in places they just shouldn't be. You've got so much development to the west of Houston and to the north of Houston. Areas that used to be prairie land are now subdivisions, and that's less prairie to soak up water. So that's all going to run off, and you've just got a whole different dynamic in the Houston area than you had even 5-10 years ago in terms of flooding. So all these issues need to be addressed. There's a lot of thoughts and conversations out there. One of the other big problems is that people were buying homes behind reservoirs, and they didn't realize that they were in the flood pool of the reservoir when they built the house. I don't know how this happens, but it happened, and we need to rectify it. So people are talking about that. There's a gentleman by the name of Jim Blackburn. I attended a talk of his a couple of weeks ago, and he talked all about these proposals and plans that he's suggesting for Houston and for Texas in general. And basically, we just need to be in the mindset that we're going to have to spend money. Somebody's going to have to spend money, and if we want to ensure is more survivable during these events, you're just going to have to do it because a catastrophe on the ship channel doesn't just affect Houston.
Mm-hmm.
Economic issue. You've got petrochemical products that are responsible for, I think, the majority of the jet fuel in the country comes from the ship channel. A lot of the gasoline from the country, there's refineries there. That comes from the channel. So you're just talking about cascading problems in the event that we get a really, really bad hurricane here, not just a flood. So we got issues that we need to address, and it's going to be tough, but we need to be serious about it. And that's one of I think it's kind of the new goal for our Space City Weather blog, is to kind of keep those issues out there as best as we can. But it's going to take more than us for sure.
Yeah, I think resilience is the new movement, Matt. I was at the Flash conference 2 weeks ago in Atlanta, and I think that is really critical. And I think we're the folks who have to do it. They talk about we're the ones that have to advance the climate science message, but I think the resilience message is also important, especially given this year's hurricanes.
I completely agree, and I think that one of the issues is, and I don't want to dip my toes into the wrong place here, but when the fact of the matter is, when you start framing things in a climate change issue as a climate change issue, it becomes very controversial, very political, very heated. When you start framing it in the terms of resiliency and look, clearly we see what happens when it rains here a lot. We are clearly able to see the problems. We know what the problems are. The causes, they matter ultimately, but they don't matter to us. Like, we just need to fix the problems that we have here to make ourselves more adaptable to whatever's coming down the pipeline 25, 50 years from now.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question. I heard Dr. Rick Knapp say that for the first time, some discussion is out there about issuing evacuation orders or having evacuations inside Houston when these big rain events come. Matt, what's the word on that?
Haven't heard too much about that here. In fact, in the wake of the storm, that was one of the things. I know that there was a lot of people from outside Houston that were kind of like, well, why didn't you evacuate people? If you knew it was going to be this bad, and we knew it was going to be pretty bad. But what people don't realize is that leading up to the storm indicated 40 inches, 50 inches of rain, but that varied from Victoria, which is about 100 miles southwest of Houston, to Lake Charles, which is about 100 miles east of Houston. So, if you evacuate people, number one, who knows where it's going to rain 40 inches. Number two, evacuating a city of 3 million people, whatever, people that are in flood areas, it's just not feasible. You're gonna have people stuck on roads, and it just would be an epic disaster. So, hide from the water, run from the wind has kind of been the mantra, and I think it still kind of has to be. Now, I think you're going to have to start asking questions in places that maybe flooded 3-4 times in the last 5-6 years. Maybe when there is the potential for 8 to 10 inches of rain or whatever, that you just have to get out. But I mean, honestly, this is Houston. It rains a lot. You got a summertime thunderstorm that sits over you and dumps 5 inches in an hour, and you've got equally bad problems in a small little part of the city. So are we going to run from the rain every time it rains here? I mean, at least 5 times in the last 3 years where there was 10 inches or more of rain that were possible in parts of the Houston area. That's not a sustainable course. So maybe for some people it's going to have to be, but we got to do better than that. And that's going to involve buying people out. It's going to involve not building in floodplains. And that's really the bottom line. And that's the solution to this at this point.
So how many structures were physically damaged by the flood, man? Do you have any idea?
I've heard estimates of upwards of, I think it's less than that. I think that was kind of a higher end estimate, but I could be completely wrong. I don't know what the latest is, but I know it's a lot, and it's kind of a jaw-dropping number. Damage definitely in the 2-digit billions to 100 billions of dollars, I think, for the entirety of Texas and parts of Louisiana from this event. So, I mean, people kind of forget that everything was Houston. I mean, you had a Category 4 storm that devastated areas near Corpus, and you had just as bad, if not worse, flooding in the Beaumont Port Arthur area, which is a few 100,000 people that live there, and they don't have near the resources that Houston has. So, I mean, those folks are hurting just as bad, if not more, than the Houston area.
It's amazing to me the heroic stories that came out afterwards with the rescues, and the news media seemed to fasten onto those, and I was glad they did, because that at least put a positive spin on it. That Texas spirit really comes through, doesn't it? We saw it yesterday with the terrible situation near San Antonio.
It's amazing. I'm from the Northeast originally, and I moved down here in 2012. So I've been here for about 5 years, and I mean, Houston's just an awesome city. It's a great city. It doesn't get near the appreciation that it deserves just as a city. It's a great place to live. It's not necessarily the greatest city in the world to visit, but as my colleague Eric Berger said, it's not necessarily a place that you want to visit, but it's a place that you want to live, for sure. It's just a wonderful community. The people here are spectacular, and that's why I wasn't really surprised after Harvey to kind of see all these people kind of come out of the woodwork, and everybody's got a boat and somehow knew to come to the Houston area to help people out, which was just awesome to witness. But yeah, I mean, like you said, even yesterday, you see it in Texas. It's a Texas thing. We try and care about each other. It's something that I've learned living down here, and I think it's something that most native Texans just kind of know from day one that's how it is. So it's a great place for sure, and there's a great deal of humanity in the state.
So how about an Alabama-Rutgers national championship game in 2024 in Reliant? How about that?
I think you're going to be waiting a little bit longer than that for Rutgers to join you.
We tried to get Penn State there this year, but they kind of blown it, it looks like. So you talked about the blog there for a minute. It's really cool because we run a high-traffic blog in Alabama and really enjoy contributing to it. But you stress that you're a no-hype zone. Talk about that, what that means.
Yeah, so when Eric brought me on, this is a couple of years ago, he was still working at the Houston Chronicle, and I guess he had kind of built up his audience at the Chronicle for just being a calm source of just information, not hysterics and going crazy and things like that. And my first job in meteorology was in television, so I've worked in TV. I did it for 4.5 years in upstate New York, so I kind of understand that everybody likes to say like, oh, they're going crazy about a storm, and it's not the meteorologist usually that's doing it, it's somebody else, in the other part. But it's just tough when your main sources of information, like the meteorologists in Houston, are fantastic. I think I cannot say enough good about them. So it's always kind of conflicting for me to say that we're better than everybody else, because we're not. Everybody's great. But we just kind of take on a tone that, like, we understand our audience wants information. They don't necessarily want hyperbole or anything like that. We basically, what we want is we want people to realize that when we get nervous about something, okay, maybe they need to start really paying attention, and maybe they need to be a little nervous too. For us during Harvey, we had a few people that left comments on our blog saying that, like, when we heard you guys start to take a real serious tone and get really concerned, we got concerned and we got out or whatever. There was one story about one reader that actually took their belongings, or at least some of their stuff, from their first floor and moved it to their second floor 2 days before the storm because of the stuff that we were putting out. And their house flooded. And because of that, their possessions or whatever they moved was fine. And that just completely resonated with me, that, when you take on sort of a tone that is measured and calm and only gets to a point where it needs to be hyperbolic when it has to be, absolutely has to be, like in a Harvey situation, I think you do good with your readership, your viewers, whatever. And it's something that I wish we could see, over a broader scale. And I think you're starting to see it, because I think everybody's aware of it. And I think everybody knows that, there's just a lot of hype and hyperbole with every little thing that comes down the pipeline. And I think meteorologists are, for the most part, hyper aware of it now, and we're getting better.
So you mentioned that you were physically sick looking at the data in the days before landfall. How did you communicate that? What did you do with words on your blog to communicate that message and get the seriousness across?
It's tough to do, because you're not going to go out there and say, like, oh man, I'm looking at the latest term model and I want to vomit. That's not going to go well with that.
I know the feeling.
So I think basically the tone we took was that, look, we've got a serious situation that's coming. The weather model data, all of it suggests that 10 to 20 inches of rain is possible over the next 12 to 18 hours. Clearly, if that happens, where it does happen, it's going to be problematic. So you need to be paying attention, and you need to be aware of what's coming through the pipeline tonight. And just basically, even then, trying not to overplay it too much, but just let people know, look, you need to be understood. That one of the messages I said was, you need to leave your phone alerts on for warnings from, how your phone gets you tornado and flash flood warnings and amber alerts. A lot of people turn that off, admittedly me included. But during Harvey, we had people kind of lost in the shuffle, as the National Weather Service office in Houston issued more tornado warnings during the Harvey storm than they did, I think, the previous 5 years combined. It was a tornado outbreak in addition to a major flooding event. So you had some places where they were telling people houses that were under tornado warnings. So, you had to let people know, look, you need to be aware of what's going on. And that was just kind of little bits of advice to give them, not telling them to do it, but saying, it would probably be a good idea if you did this. I heard your show last week talking about people don't necessarily like to be told what to do. And I think we kind of understand that we want to, just give guidance to our audience and not kind of shove it down their throat, but let them know when we're serious, we're serious. And to try and do it in as easy and simple a language as possible, which is, it's not easy to describe sometimes. You just kind of do it. Like, there are a lot of moments during Harvey where it's just pure adrenaline. I couldn't tell you what I did for half of it. I just kind of went and did what I thought I knew was right and just rolled with it.
So
hey, Matt, let me chase a rabbit real quick. On all those tornado warnings issued by the Weather Service in Houston, it just seemed like they were nonstop. Do you know the false alarm ratio with those tornadoes during Hurricane Harvey, the tornado warnings?
I think they issued somewhere in the order of like 140 during the course of the storm, and I think we confirmed about close to 30. The problem, and this is a big problem, at least from a false alarm ratio standpoint, is that they weren't able to get out and look at damage. There was just too much water. You couldn't get anywhere. So there were a lot of warnings that they issued on possible tornadoes that you'll never know if they were legitimate or not. And that was one of the things that I questioned. I wrote a blog post probably a couple weeks after Harvey, and just kind of went through some of the confirmed tornadoes that had happened in the Houston area. And because oddly enough, during the actual storm itself, I didn't have a lot of time to really look at the radar and digest everything that was going on. I'm going from one place to another. So, it's tough to really make sense of everything. But looking at it in hindsight, at the radar 2 weeks later, and I'm just like, they issued so many warnings, how did they do this? And it was tough. I mean, it was extremely, you had, situations where you could have had 5 circulations in a storm that could have dropped a tornado at any time. And I mean, it's real tough to do when you're talking about tornadoes that last maybe 5 to 10 minutes, if that. But I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but I know a lot of people were definitely jarred by the amount of tornado warnings that were issued. But I think given the circumstances, they did as good a job as they possibly could have.
Right. And my comment's not meant to be critical of the Weather Service in Houston, but you know the deal. This is whack-a-mole stuff. And the problem I was seeing, and again, I watched from a distance with extreme interest. It's a great social science case study. But every time a tornado warning was issued, the WEA alerts go off on these phones. And you had alert after alert after alert after alert after alert. And it seemed from the response that there was a lot of warning fatigue as a result of all of that. And I think we have to look at this in the weather enterprises. How do you handle something like this? Do you try and catch all of them? Are we that good? If not, how do you? And again, I don't know the answer, but I did sense a lot of warning fatigue out of there.
100% agree. There are people that now, when they hear that alert go off on their phone, it's probably PTSD for them. People that were hiding in their bathroom, coming out, hiding in their bathroom, coming out. And in addition to that, you've got all the flooding. It was torture for some people in this area by any stretch of the imagination. I'm really interested to see, number one, the response. Anytime it rains now, again, we've been pretty fortunate we haven't had any big rains in too much of the area since Harvey, but we know it's going to happen again. So what's the response going to be then? And I'm really interested in what kids are going to be like here. They're hearing that too, and they're seeing their parents freak out a little bit. And I don't know what it's going to be like, but I completely agree that I don't know what the better way is, but there has to be kind of a better way to go about this, at some point.
So Matt, you've contributed to the 538 blog. Talk about that for a minute. What you've done there and what that's about.
Yes, I mean that's been pretty cool. I haven't done it since I think the last thing I did was Matthew. Actually, I was too busy during Harvey to really do anything for sure. Yeah, basically what happened was it was kind of fortuitous. I'd actually gotten laid off from my job previous to being a Schneer Energy. I worked for Deutsche Bank here in Houston. They actually had an energy trading shop, and I was their meteorologist for a couple of years. And I wasn't sure what was going to happen, if I was going to get hired or not. So I'm like, well, I weather blogged in the past, so why not do it again? And 538 had they were looking for freelancers essentially, and one of the topics that they had posted about was weather. And so I submitted a sample, and they're like, all right, cool, sure. Read us something about the winter of, this is 2013-14, the polar vortex winter. Talk about that. And it kind of summed it up, and did a couple articles from time to time. One of the better ideas I think I had was, I think it was in 2014 or 2015 in the fall. I wanted to see, what population trends were like at the coast relative to the last time they were hit by a hurricane. And 538 is obviously data. So I figured, well, population trends is a good data number, and lack of hurricanes in the last however many years is a good data point. So one of the things that I kind of discovered was that there's just been a massive surge in population pretty much on the entire coast up through 2015. It's still growing. And who knows with how many people have come from Puerto Rico after the hurricanes there and now living in Florida. Probably the most common place is my guess. So now that population continues to grow too. So that was sort of a combination idea of, taking some data and bringing up an issue that I think is kind of a big deal, because one of the things I told people here is the thing that keeps me up at night in Houston, this was long before Harvey, was, if a major hurricane comes through here, the population's exploded in the last 10 years. There's a lot of people that have never lived through a hurricane, and they're, not going to know what to do during it. So I think it's one of the things that just kind of hammers home the idea that we have to be very cognizant of what we're saying and who we're talking to and what our audience is. So it's a fun gig for sure. It's all about trying to come up with ideas to write about. That's kind of the cool thing, I guess, about freelance, is that you're kind of thrown into writing whatever you want. But it's also kind of a curse, because then you actually have to take time out of your day to try and come up with stuff. So between my day job and the Space City Weather blog, it's been tough to really make time to sit and be creative and come up with something.
Well, we've missed the obvious question. Talk about your day job for a minute, because it is a fascinating side of meteorology.
Yeah, so there's a number of energy companies. They can be natural gas companies, power companies, even some banks and hedge funds. They all trade, gas, natural gas, power, oil. They're all tradable commodities. And the price of power and the price of natural gas is very much directly related to what happens with the weather. Does it get hot? Do people use their air conditioners? Does it get cold? Do people use heaters? It's a real simple problem, but the problem is trying to forecast out almost into the weeds, 10, 15 days into the future to try and give your traders and people at your shop a little bit of an advantage on everybody else with your weather knowledge. And, I say we like to break the rules a little bit sometimes for meteorology. If you go to a professor and say, I want to forecast 2 weeks out with, some specificity for part of the country, they're going to laugh at you and be like, that's not really possible at this point, other than using a strict model. So, we kind of go into the weeds of meteorology and try to predict it. There's companies out there that predict weather for a whole bunch of different companies that aren't fortunate enough to have a meteorologist. I wish more did, obviously from our point of view, because it's more jobs for meteorologists, but it's interesting because you are on the cutting edge of forecasting. We know that, we have the 7-day figured out, what's the next big challenge, and that's kind of going out 10, 15 days and trying to get better with our forecasting in that time frame. And that's kind of what you get to practice in the field of energy meteorology for the sake of providing information to your customer, which in my case is a gas company, and other people's case would be a utility power company. Before I came to Cheniere, where I'm at now, I worked for Southern California Edison in Los Angeles and in SoCal to help predict what energy demand was going to be like on a given day. So
can't you just use the 45-day AccuWeather product?
I will refrain from comments.
Oh my goodness! So in that vein, we had obviously mentoring at the NWA meeting, and a lot of kids that are coming through, wanting to get advice, and you're going to serve on the early career panel for the AMS coming up here soon. Matt, what advice are you giving to young meteorologists and students as they're planning their careers now?
It's been interesting. I think my advice has kind of evolved over time after, which I guess is great when you're in a career and you kind of see things and you learn things. So, initially my advice was to be good at communicating weather information in language that your customer, whoever it is, can understand. But I think now the biggest piece of advice that I would give people, as we start getting to points where we talk about automation and all this other stuff, is diversify your background. Because, for example, myself, I wish I had a stronger computer programming background. I wish I had more business acumen. If you have an MBA and a meteorology degree, I personally think you're dangerous as a job candidate. So telling people to diversify, whether it's business, whether it's energy, whether it's social science, all of it, I think, is critical information and critical background to have going forward as the future of our jobs evolves from less, rudimentary forecasting to a lot of explaining what the forecast is. I mean, I do a lot of forecasting in my job, but I do a lot more communicating that information. And trying to communicate it in language that my people can understand. Is the weather bullish? If you don't know what that means, and you want to get into energy, you need to know what that means. So, just kind of having a business background to some extent, I think is great. Having a computer programming background would be great too. And just being good at communication would also help you, because I think there's going to be a lot of government agencies that consider meteorologists going forward, and being able to kind of take all the information that's out there and condensing it into something simple for a decision maker to understand.
It does seem like that decision support is becoming more and more important at every level, from the smallest business to the largest organization, and every governmental agency around is dependent on that. And it's impossible to just derive that from public products. It takes specialty forecasting to do that.
Yeah, it for sure. I think where the National Weather Service is going is fantastic. Nothing but good things to say about kind of the evolution that they're undertaking. But But I mean, it's true. You know, I mean, we read stories about staffing issues there. You know, they can only do so much, and they can only be in so many places at one time. You know, as time goes on, you know, we're just going to have to get better at it. And I think people will recognize the value of both having the NWS there for the big situations and maybe having your own meteorologist. Speaking in Houston, you know, Harris County flood control organization here, basically the ones that monitor the bayous and everything, they're fortunate to have a meteorologist, Jeff Linder, who kind of became a quasi-celebrity during the storm. He does a fantastic job because he's embedded with them. He knows what they want to know, and you know, he's good as a outward-facing person too, to kind of help you know, news organizations and other people get through the storm. So I think more governmental agencies will see that there's value to having both a National Weather Service and having somebody on staff that can maybe interpret some of what they're saying and interpret all the other stuff that's out there. You know, as you continue to get hammered with information, one of the big things I do is monitor social media and put out fires. You know, I want to get ahead of anything that's you know, garbage that's out there, and just, you know, be like, no, that day 15 GFS model that you saw is not going to happen. Here's what we have to watch, you know, things like that. And I think that there's a legitimate need for that for meteorologists.
I think it's very important.
Let's talk about social media for just a second, Bill. I'm sorry.
No.
Matt, describe your social media strategy for the world here.
He is a Twitter monster.
Tweeterific.
I do focus on the Twitter. It's interesting, you know, when I had gotten laid off from my job, I kind of said, well, look, I need to make, you know, as many contacts as possible. And there's a lot of meteorologists on Twitter, and I've been kind of neglecting it. So I'll start getting more involved, and it just sort of snowballed from there. You know, I just like anybody else, you know, I like to put good information out there. I like to interact with other meteorologists and talk shop sometimes, although it's a little tough to do in the public facing environment sometimes, because you know, somebody sees that and starts asking questions. But it's great to get to know people and network, and you know, have some fun with it. You know, I'm a big GIF person, so I'm always throwing animated GIFs out there to try and just describe. I like to try and describe, you know, like what are people feeling like? You know, right now it's been 87 to 89 degrees for 5 straight days now in Houston. Most of us, I think, are sick of it. You know, we kind of want fall weather. So, you know, just kind of throwing gifts out there to sort of describe that we're melting and, you know, we need some relief. You know, it resonates with people to some extent. And I think just being honest and being real, what I want is I want my social media presence to be who I am if you were to meet me face to face. I don't want there to be any difference between that, which is why a lot of times I'll put stuff out there that, you know, maybe other people might think twice about, but that's what's on my mind. And that's kind of what I'm thinking, what I'm talking about. And, you know, if you meet me in person, I want you to get the same Matt that you got on the Twitter handle.
Do you use Snapchat or Instagram?
I use Instagram, but not outwardly. I keep my profile kind of locked down, and mainly friends and family, or if a meteorologist or somebody I know adds me, I'll happily add them back. I've tried Snapchat, but my problem is I need to like focus on one thing. So like I put all my eggs in the Twitter basket for the most part, but who knows, maybe one day I'll come over to that, because you know, like you guys had a good conversation about this last week, and we're talking about the different platforms and what works. And you know, Twitter doesn't necessarily work great with you know, general public. It's a nice niche, but it's not necessarily going to get you there. So I think kind of looking into Snapchat, which I think is great to connect with younger people, which are the people that we're going to need to connect with, because I mean, they're just using phone apps, right, or whatever now, and there's not context in a phone app. They need that context. So if we can provide that for them, then we're doing our job.
This is where I get to play my song. I see Kevin's.
Let's get social. With social media.
Okay, sorry, Bill.
No, James, you can go ahead and wrap after Matt tells me one thing. How about these Astros this year?
Oh man, what a story. And you know, it was satisfying, because when we moved here in 2012, I was like, I don't like the home team. I'm a Phillies fan by birth, right? So I love the Phillies. It was like, all right, I want to like the home team, so I'm going to adopt the Texans, the Rockets, and the Astros. Astros were a 100-loss team, but I started following like blogs about their minor league system, and like, oh man, these guys are going to be great. They're doing this right. So I'm really thrilled with like buying totally at the bottom of this team and just watching them grow. So it was it was happy. I was happy for the team, but I was more satisfied. Like, yes, this is what I've been watching for 5 years, and it's finally, come to fruition. But it is an amazing uplift for the city. I mean, everybody's been thrilled about it all. The parade they had here on Friday was outstanding. It is what Houston needed.
And you know the deal. So we visited Minute Maid Park this year, and the Astros won the World Series. Last year, our random trip was to Wrigley Field.
Uh-oh.
The Cubs won the World Series.
So we're going next year, James. We need to know.
We are taking offers and free trips and tickets. Anybody that wants their baseball team to perform well, just please let us know. No,
I challenge you to come to Wichita Falls.
Okay, we can make that happen. But no, it was a great experience, man. I have never been to Minute Maid Park, and had a great time. We caught a couple of games there. The fans were great. Energy, excitement was great. Obviously, the team was good, so I was pulling for them all the way. I'm a Red Sox guy. When they went down, I got on the Astros bandwagon.
Good.
Yeah, and I went when it was Enron.
Wow. All right, so let's do this. Let's take a break. Kevin, you need to say anything here before you go back on TV?
No, I'm done till 10.
Okay, good, cool. Let's take a quick break. We've got Professor Peters. We have Tony Rice, and the Astronomy Report. Will come back with the weather roundup, picks of the week, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
WeatherBrains 101 with Professor Peters.
Some of the most interesting presentations I heard at the 2017 National Weather Association annual meeting were about atmospheric rivers and their impacts on the western United States. Atmospheric rivers are relatively long, narrow regions in the atmosphere, much like rivers in the sky, that are responsible for most of the horizontal transport of water vapor outside of the tropics. While atmospheric rivers come in many shapes and sizes, those that contain the largest amounts of water vapor, the strongest wind, and stall over watersheds vulnerable to flooding can create extreme rainfall and floods. These events can disrupt travel, induce mudslides, and cause catastrophic damage to life and property. However, not all atmospheric rivers cause damage. Most are weak and provide beneficial rain or snow that is crucial to water supply. And as was the case in 2017, atmospheric rivers can bust a drought wide open. Think of an atmospheric river as a flowing column of condensed water vapor in the atmosphere responsible for producing significant levels of rain and snow. When atmospheric rivers move inland and sweep upward over the mountains, rises and cools to produce heavy precipitation. A strong atmospheric river is capable of transporting water vapor 7 to 15 times the average flow of water at the mouth of the Mississippi River. On average, about 30 to 50% of the annual precipitation on the West Coast occurs as the result of just a few atmospheric river events. Atmospheric rivers move with the weather pattern and are present on the Earth somewhere at any given time. The rivers are 250 to 375 miles wide on average. Thanks to a decade of research, an improved understanding of atmospheric rivers and their importance has helped to improve forecasting of these events. Besides being the name for a 2008 movie, the term Pineapple Express is used to describe one of these rivers, which can transport vast amounts of water vapor from the Hawaiian Islands area to the west coast of the United States. If you have a question about the weather, you can send an email to question@weatherbrains.com.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your Astronomy Outlook.
I've been searching for something positive to say about daylight saving time, and I think I finally found it. More evening opportunity to enjoy the night sky. As you head out after supper, there's a number of interesting things to look for. Saturn's currently visible low on the southwestern horizon, about an hour after sunset. The ring planet shines at magnitude 0.5, making it really easy to pick out from the much dimmer stars that surround it. If you've got a small to moderate-sized telescope, or even a good pair of binoculars, those will bring the rings into view. If you've never seen the rings with your own eyes before, I highly recommend giving it a try. As the nights continue to grow colder, winter constellations are coming into view. The most prominent one is Orion the Hunter, and it's really easy to spot. Just look for the 3 bright stars that make up the hunter's belt. Look for Orion about halfway up the eastern sky, around 9 p.m. For early risers, look for Jupiter to reemerge from behind the sun over the coming weekend. See, it is about a half hour before sunrise. If you look just below, you'll see Venus. By early next week, the pair will be about 1/3 of a degree apart. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
We're doing the show on the 6th of November. Time for the weather roundup. It is colder than a well digger's backside in upstate Alaska up north. Coldest air so far this season. Saw some single-digit lows this morning over Montana. And looks like Green Bay's on Monday Night Football. It's pretty cold up there. So our friends up north, it is cold. And Kevin is not there at the moment. I was going to check and see how he's doing in Wichita Falls. Aubrey, how's the weather? Kind of muggy and humid where you are?
Yes, so muggy and humid in Virginia now. We are 54 over 49. It was beautiful today. We had a cold front cross, no moisture because they don't usually lead to things in the Shenandoah Valley. And it's going to be freezing tomorrow. So temperatures continue to fall. So we're looking at a midnight high and a very cold rain tomorrow with some sleet in our higher elevation areas.
So how are the leaves, Aubrey?
The leaves were fantastic. You know, this professor from Virginia Tech came out about the second week in October and said, this is going to be the worst year for leaves ever. It's going to be one of the worst years. And I wrote a strongly worded letter back very politely. And I said, sir, I respect your credentials, exactly, but I have to disagree with the pictures that I am seeing. And it was a little scary for about one weekend where everything was drab, but we got some rain and we've only had like one major wind event this fall and everything came together nicely. And the last 10-12 days have been absolutely spectacular. So we had great color very early in the season, a little drabby in the middle, but great colored now. We're getting to the end where things are turning a little bit more drab, but I've gone out on a couple hikes. I've actually gone to the national park 3 times within 10 days, hiked again last Friday, and it's been spectacular. So obviously I don't think it's the best year, but it's definitely not one of the worst.
Yeah, what do they know anyway?
I mean, just 3 guys, right? I'm just kidding.
Right.
But you really can't, you can't really deem that though in the second week of October because we have so much further to go throughout the month. So I think it was just a little early to try and say that because we actually did end up having a really good season. And in fact, I think the end of the season was actually better than last year in my own humble opinion.
Awesome. All right, well, down here in the Deep South, we do have a muggies. Dew point was sitting around 70 today.
Oh, no.
That was our high.
Yeah.
And fog tonight, zero visibility.
Yeah, we got a DFA, dense fog advisory. And but we're going to, so Kevin, are you in the cool air out there?
Yeah, it feels good. We've been unseasonably warm here for most of the late summer and early fall, but we cooled down, cooler tomorrow, cooler still, only in the 40s, I think, on Wednesday with some rain as opposed to some thunderstorms, which is great. And we're starting to see a little bit of color the last 2 or 3 days. Certainly nothing like Aubrey gets. And who's that woman, the photographer? Jen
Johnson.
Jen Johnson.
She figured out how to take those Shenandoah fall color pictures. She really has that mastered. Yeah,
she's
you
good.
guys get color in Texas, Kevin? You have trees.
There's four trees, and one is red, and the rest are yellow.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. What they call a tree in Texas, we call a bush where I am.
I was gonna say I thought it was just bush.
So Matt, what's happening in Houston town?
So the last 5 days, it's been 88, 87, 87, 88, 89. It is late summer for sure. It's humid. You feel it. It's been sunny at least. I mean, that's good. But front comes through here. I think tomorrow night and Wednesday. We are looking forward to a cool down. for a few days.
Yeah, awesome. And we had some severe weather, a few tornadoes on the boundary yesterday, but today was pretty quiet. And again, we have our new tropical storm in the Atlantic, Rena, which should not affect North America at all. But I tell you what here, let's just see if just maybe, Aubrey has a little email to read.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
All right. And I just saw Jim Cantori tweet out that several area residents are receiving funds today that everyone across the country has donated from Harvey. So saw a picture on Twitter. So very cool stuff.
In Houston, you mean?
In Houston. Did I say Houston?
No, I was trying to funds from what?
Harvey, Houston. You can't read my mind.
I was with you on the leaves, but I got lost on the funds.
I do that to my husband all the time, and now I realize that it's actually me. It's not him.
He's vindicated, Kevin.
Is it Weather Channel funds or FEMA funds? Or
it does not say. It just says funds. They look like American Express gift cards.
Oh, I see.
So no details other than that.
I think that was the Jeff Lindner. So a group of people band together. I told you about Jeff Lindner, the Harris County flood meteorologist. A bunch of people said, we want to pay for a vacation for him.
Right.
He's a government employee, obviously can't take that. So he's taking the funds that were contributed to that and doling them out to residents.
Oh, isn't that something? That's
great.
fantastic.
Great story.
Good for him.
Awesome. Always good stuff. All right. So we have a lot of interesting emails coming in. One is from Terry. Terry said, I met this beautiful woman. She had the sweetest personality. Everything was going great. She knew I was into weather. And in a text today, she informed me that she likes snow and also lightning, LIGHTENING storms. Now I can never talk to her again. So, Terry, we're so sorry. We all know what a broken heart has felt like. But Terry is still in the 100% club. I'm guessing seeing every single show through David Black, Dr. Tim, who I wish was still on the show. His rants were the best. It sounds like a challenge. And of course, the world's greatest weatherman, JB Elliott. Terry is from Arkansas, but JB will always be a celebrity and legend. Love the show rants as always. Some more geek and science added to the mix. Perhaps a rundown on the parameters when a big severe event is getting close, and maybe some science behind why anticipated systems may bust or underperform. Just some great suggestions. So thanks, Terry, for sending that note in.
Maybe Tim and I could have a rant off one day.
No. Don't tempt us with a good time.
And there's your show title.
I'm about to say that is another show title. Wow.
All right. So Daniel Lucas on the weather news, and a big shout out to the Capitol Weather Gang for all of their great articles recently. Understaffed Weather Service scales back balloon launches that collect vital forecast data. And if I'm not mistaken, yeah, here they are. In Alaska, 6 locations in Alaska, about 24 balloon launches per week. Definitely not the way that we want to go. Also, in addition to that, the Weather Service is teetering on the brink of failure, the labor union says, because down hundreds of staff. Always positive news there. And also, let's see, from Daniel Lucas, the 5 years after Sandy, Hurricane Sandy, or post-tropical Sandy, whatever you want to call it, National Weather Service threat communication is still a pile of mush. So Daniel Lucas is full of great news in the inbox.
Yeah, boy, I'm depressed now.
In addition to the wonderful article from Angela about women who are being passed over for the chief meteorologist jobs at an alarming rate. Only 8% of us.
Wow. But you made it.
I made it. I was one of the few. And I have to say, timing had a lot to do with it. Obviously skill. But, you know, as far as getting in sometimes, timing for me, I think was the biggest part. But it doesn't mean I wasn't up against a male.
You know what? You're in that there's that ladies group, the Facebook group.
Yes.
Is there any suggestion that some would not pursue a chief job based upon all the static and all the extra caca-poo-poo that you guys have to put up with?
I think there are a few people who
Really?
have expressed that that's not the job that it's not foreseen as the job that everyone wants to strive for.
Because I've had two women tell me lately that there have been examples of some of the just ridiculously rude things that they put up with on Facebook. And one in particular said, there are so many people that I would love to block, but I don't want to lose the likers count on Facebook, the count of people who have liked the page. And I just thought that was horrible. I think that's
a shame.
It's disgusting.
That's a pure shame. And I wish that person wouldn't think that way. And unfortunately, there are some stations who think of their talent based on the likes and how many people follow your page, which is really a sham. And I really wish that person felt differently. And hopefully if her station doesn't do that, don't worry about the likes.
No, I mean, and I guess to her credit, and several of them, they kind of brush it off and they go, oh, well, that's part of the thing. And they let it roll past them, which is, probably a sign of strength. But it just is really sad and disappointing. I sadly don't see any solution for it either.
It is very sad. And I have no problem if someone is particularly rude, which for me, I'm very lucky. I know I'm one of the very few lucky ones where I don't see a lot of it. And I always give credit to the area and the people in this community, just something about them. But, if someone's going to be rude, I will block you. I have no qualms about doing that. And I would not hesitate to do it. And if you don't like me, I don't care if you don't like my page. It does not bother me one bit.
Well, I'm glad to hear you take that, because I felt sorry for the couple that have said that to me lately.
Likes
and the
Facebook
climate's
likes
changing
and pages, it doesn't define you. It does not define you. In fact, you have to think, you as a person, we all have favorite people that we like watching on TV, whether it be a show or in the media or whoever, or a weather person that we, meteorologist that we look up to and just really like how they do things. But you have to think, for us, like, I know I would never reach out to someone and particularly say something to them positively. And we have to think that more so there are people who like us and appreciate what we are doing, and they are not the ones that appreciate us, the ones that really like us and enjoy us and bring us into their homes every night. Those are the people who are watching and who don't say anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and there are far more many people doing that than stepping forward and trying to, scuff your day.
No, it's not. You're right. There's a tiny vocal majority that is nasty, and they are tiny and useless.
Yes. Very much so. Oh, is that me? Okay, I will continue. This, I don't know if this was, did we talk about Dan Stedman during the recent tornado that hit Spartanburg? This is from October 25th. We had an excellent 45-minute warning for the storm, but there was one thing that frustrated me. Despite being in the polygon, no one where I worked knew what the tornado plan was. Any suggestions on how to develop a tornado plan for our company so it doesn't happen again? Thankfully, no injuries, but we were carrying on business as usual while I'm saying it's coming. I think that's very important for a lot of companies, because maybe a lot of places don't have a tornado plan.
I think that's true.
Yeah, is that something that, and maybe Rick, I guess, would answer if he were here too, but Brian, you were in that same position. Is it welcome that a company would call the local weather service office and say, hey, we'd love a little guidance?
Yes. I've done many of those, both before I retired and since I retired.
So that's a good way.
There's a lot of great companies out there that really look out for their employees, and it's basically a simple walkthrough usually that you just talk to the safety manager or whoever is the safety focal point for the company. And a lot of times I've gotten invited at the TV station, to companies to do a tornado safety talk, and then we've talked about the plan for their employees after the safety talk. So those always go nice. And I know one company that I have a very good relationship with, they were going to build an addition to their office, and the office manager talked them into adding about $15,000 to the cost, and they built a tornado shelter for their addition. And it holds like 75 people.
Well, then I say, is it a good way if you want to get your local office? Here's what I'm suggesting. Brian can tell me if there's something better. But you can go to just weather.gov,
Mhm.
click on your region of the United States map. It'll take you to your regional office, and down on the bottom there is contact information for that particular office. Is
And
that
usually
best
the
way?
person you want to talk with is the warning coordination meteorologist.
Right.
WCM, sometime abbreviated in places where they don't determine or don't specify what the abbreviations mean to people who don't understand all that jargon.
Yeah, that was a good note. I'm sorry, Aubrey.
Great. Good note. Great information. And for those that maybe are thinking like, oh, maybe I don't know if my company has one or not. That's also a good idea to pass along.
Bring it up. Suggestion box.
To anyone. It's not just the classrooms in the schools, but it's where you work as well. And I think that's it because I have to get ready for show. So
Yeah, what's your pick of the week, Aubrey? Let's jump
my pick of the week. I just and a shout out to Ryan Maui for tweeting this because I was left with nothing. I had nothing, no warning, and I therefore came upon an article. So this one is actually from NBC LA. The fire officials reveal the cause of the Orange County Canyon fires 1 and 2, and it looks like 2 is a result of the first one. I did a quick search, and I still have not seen a cause for the Napa. I can't remember the name of the Napa one, but for the for that fire as well. So that is my pick of the week via Mr. Ryan Maui.
Outstanding. Thank you, Aubrey. Go have a great show. Thank you for being here tonight.
Email at weatherbrains.com. Follow us on the Twitter and the Facebook. You don't have to like us if you don't want to, but we won't base our show based off of how many likes we see. We know you still watch us and like us. So.
Obviously. Thank you,
Hi,
Aubrey.
Matt. Thanks for being on tonight.
Thanks, Aubrey. Appreciate it.
Brian Peters, what's your pick of the week?
Well, it was Matt's fault, actually. Reminded me of a really good book that I read called Isaac's Storm. And so I'll have a link to that via Goodreads. You can find it on Amazon.com as well, but it's really a good read. So I'd recommend that.
That was an excellent book. I really enjoyed that.
Yes. Who was the author of that book? It really was out.
Some foreign name, wasn't it?
No, Eric. Oh gosh,
Larson.
Yeah. Larson. That's
Larson.
it.
Oh
Eric
yeah,
Larson.
that'd be a great get for the show. We always say who would be a great get. That would be a great one. So
that would.
Yeah.
We'll
That was a fascinating book.
By the way, Matt, you stuck around long enough, so you better have a pick here by the time he gets to the end.
Yeah, you're one away. You're on deck, as the Astros say, Matt. And we'll go to Kevin Selly in Wichita Falls. Kevin, your pick of the week.
I have a little bit of a blend of weather and fire weather and technology. It's just a blog post or a post, I think. Oh, CNET.
CNET.
Yeah,
Yep.
they had a guy go in with a new iPhone 10 in the aftermath of some of the fires and take pictures, sort of to document the aftermath of the fires, but also kind of give you an idea of how the pictures worked out of the iPhone 10. So
And
little techie weather thing.
You know which one of those, Kevin, hit me the most? Was the one with the 2 green sprouts coming up through the burn.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
it is that's a great picture of hope and renewal.
Right. One of those things that says, after such devastation, life will eventually find its way back.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Good pictures.
Outstanding. Thank you, Kevin. Matt, we come to you. What's your pick of the week?
So I'm going to also go with a book. Those people that follow me on Twitter know I often share what books I'm reading because I'm becoming a more avid reader. But the book that I'm currently reading, I'm almost done with, is called A Texan Plan for the Texas Coast. And it's by this gentleman, Jim Blackburn from Rice University that I talked about, basically outlining what he thinks is the optimal plan to help protect and essentially save the Texas coast as we go forward in time from hurricanes. I think it's timely given what we were talking about tonight and given recent events. So I will tweet out that Amazon link so you can go ahead and order.
Is that James Blackburn?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I've got the link.
Great.
If Amazon.com's okay with you.
It works for me.
Okay.
Right. Sell
I got it.
those books. That's another book I got to buy now. Thank you so much, Matt. I'm covered up in books over here. And my pick of the week is going to be a movie. We talk all the time about incident meteorologists and how important they are in fire. And we talked about fire a little bit tonight. But I went to see the movie Only the Brave yesterday, and I don't know if you've seen that, but catch it while it's in the theater. It's not getting a lot of attention, but it is a fabulous movie about the Yarnell Hill fire. The Granite Mountain Hotshots. I don't know if you remember, they were a team of 20 firefighters that were the first municipal wildfire fighting unit in the country. And they got caught in a thunderstorm-induced wind shift that blew the fire over them. And only the lookout survived. His name is Brendan McDonough. And I was so moved by this movie that I reached out to him last night, and during the show tonight, he responded, and is going to be with us in a couple of weeks on the show. And it is a fascinating movie. The personal stories and the meteorology, behind the fire part is fascinating, and the fire part of it, how those people, the hot shots work is just amazing. So I encourage everybody to run out and see that movie this week before it gets away. I hope that it'll show up in the Academy Awards. It's a great performance with Josh Brolin as the superintendent of the hot shots, and Miles Teller plays the part of Brendan McDonough, who's sort of the antagonist of the story, the second antagonist, I guess. But it is extremely well done, and the performances are just phenomenal, and I think you will love it if you get a chance. So that's my pick of the week tonight. So, gentlemen, now that it's just us, we've lost Aubrey. Any further business before we adjourn?
I'll mention that James's pick was the SPC experimental HREF page.
I was just about to make that my pick of the week this week before he snatched it from me, but I was glad that I got to use the movie as mine. So anything you want to add, Matt? Thank you for joining us on short notice tonight.
No, it's an honor to be on. It's definitely fun. I hope a bit or two, or if they have any questions about anything, about energy, about Houston, about Harvey, whatever, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or wherever you want to.
Yeah, tell them how to do that, man.
And that is my Twitter handle is just my name, @MattLanza, MattLanza.
Well, I couldn't believe I hadn't had you on the show earlier. I know we've been friends for a long time, and I thought we had done it. When I went back to look and see, what show you were on before, I was kind of flabbergasted to see you weren't there. So I'm glad we rectified that issue tonight. So thank you for joining us.
I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
And you're welcome back anytime. Well, Brian Peters, WeatherBrains is the netcast. It's all about weather. We do it on Monday nights, and love doing it. As James said, we're in the 600s now. I guess we're approaching what year? Let's see, Brian, I know this because the first show was on February the 1st, 2006. I had to go back and look at that. So I guess when we roll around to next year, it will be our 12th anniversary when we get to February 1st. That's just amazing. So
yep, this is 11.846. So
11.846
years. So yeah, so we're coming up on 12. Yep,
we've been around a while. I tell you, and that the name has stuck, Brian. I was a little skeptical at first, Yeah,
I remember James said, "You wanna do this little thing, this podcast?" I said, "What the heck is a podcast?"
Yeah. So we love it. We got some great guests coming up. Next week we'll have the folks from the Weather Pros. We're going to have some folks from what's the Canadian network, or not the Canadian network, but what's the other network besides the Weather Channel?
Weather Nation?
Weather Nation. Steve Glazer, his wife, Karen Geronin, are going to join us to talk about careers that night. Author Stephen Long is going to talk about the 1938 hurricane on the 27th of November from a forestry standpoint. We'll probably have some good leaf questions to ask him too. Eli Jacks will be along on December the 4th to talk about the Weather Service's simplification process. The retiring Steve Weiss will be with us on December 11th.
Wow.
We'll be talking the new JPSS satellite on the 18th. Pam Heinzelman will join us talking about warm on forecast on the 20th. Greg Carbon will recap the year on our year-end show on December 21st, and then we'll turn the page to a new year, Brian Peters.
2018. Holy mackerel.
I hope that I won't be here on January 8th when the guest will be Andrew Yeager, because I hope Alabama will be playing in Atlanta that night, Matt Lanza. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a good feeling, but we'll see how it goes. But Until next week, when our guests are the guys from the Weather Pros, I'm Bill Murray for the whole gang here at WeatherBrains. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Monday night.
And silk and linen are the traditional materials for the 12th anniversary. So
send silk and linen if you want to send a gift.
Yeah, but jade and opal are also good choices.
Yeah, we won't turn down jade or opal. Or
Absolutely
cash,
not.
will we, Brian?
Well, cash is the same as jade, right? It's green.
There you go. All right. Well, you guys have a good night.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Fantastic
guys.
show.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Bye.
Will. 20 people are still watching. Why about that? So thank you, guys. We're in the middle of the news here, so I have to run. Great having Mr. Lanza on the show. Great stuff tonight, and we'll see you guys next Monday night. You'll have a great week, and God bless. Bye-bye.